You out of the shot. You're in right there.
Okay, stay in front of the desk.
Into the edge of that desk. So as long as you're in front of the desk, you're safe.
Okay. Am I out of the shot here?
You're out of the shot there.
Okay, so as long as I'm in front of the desk. Okay.
Yes.
At some point I might wander behind the desk, but I'll try to do it when I'm not talking.
Now I'm about to stream, so you guys are going live.
We're going live.
Yes.
Awesome.
So don't do anything weird.
This whole thing is us doing things that are weird.
No, it's not.
Oh wait, it's not. I mean, normal.
Yes, relatively normal.
Switch to clock. Switch to stopwatch. And we'll use that as a timer, so we know we can see when it's going to get 45. What picture did you put in for the last slide?
C50 is live streaming.
I think.
Yeah, like anxiety.
What's the problem?
The first one, you say, I was trying to get to it, but when they Google it, they're trying to do it inside, which I didn't realize they were planning on adding any content right away. I told them to play it.
Right.
So I said, it's collaboration.
You also, like, paid the site was ready to go live, right?
Well, I told them to practice.
Right. Yes. Yeah, there's a link that.
If you go to the county YouTube account, you can find things there.
And it's also posted on the conference website.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. That's so funny. Okay.
Let me go get this. I'm sorry.
Okay.
210 is live streaming. Make sure they know that, parents, because there's a lot of milling around.
Oh, going around for one or more. How do I look now?
Great.
Anything embarrassing?
No.
You know?
I'm streaming, but I'm not getting a picture. I'm getting a picture. I'm seeing Scott and Claire go up to the front desk.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Claire.
Okay, I've got nothing on my laptop showing. Is everybody doing okay in their room with the live stream?
Yeah, my screen is up.
You need
I
help?
put the space fever. And a lot of
Anything
Yeah.
You mean your laptop is black screen or what? Yeah, well, what picture user you want?
All right, thanks for looking. Okay, make sure you got
You want me to video recording?
It's for the live stream. That's fine. That's fine.
Somebody's,
I gotta look at it.
you know, it's worked
Yes. Okay, good.
That's fine. Yeah.
510 is streaming live.
Yeah, no, I was gonna do tomorrow night.
This is Michael, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Okay, Moki, I'm gonna put, she said we have a stopwatch on, she said when we start, that will give us hopefully time for you.
You guys have a huge, we didn't go back to touristy, so I might just
It's on the top 12 things that one must do when you visit Chicago.
Well, I used to live here, so I was there before.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what you're doing? Yeah, so. Good step. We'll have to.
Yes, that helps pick up on the camera.
What if I'm using out? Does it
Using it out, maybe you should walk.
Because I only have I'm speaking like a couple of minutes, but most of the time she's speaking, so I don't want her to.
Well, you're gonna have to make sure you project, because this is the microphone that's being projected.
Streaming's all good?
Yes, it's streaming.
That was mine?
Jared to Alton.
Go ahead, Jared.
What is the name of your stream in 510?
The year of living with Google.
Okay, so your last event was flipping the law school.
Yes, it was.
I have found the fast.
Okay. Yeah, so you hit stop stream, that stream is still running. It's a live stream. So I'm gonna go ahead and just stop it from the account. But just remember to do that in the future.
Well,
Okay, copy.
I walked down
You
West
can do that in live control room.
then across.
You just first have to go to Video Manager and you have to view your live streams. And then if you click Live Control Room from there, you'll be able to stop your stream. But it stopped now.
Thanks. Okay, I got you covered.
Where's your camera? Oh, it's in my bag, what did I do with my?
$6 isn't bad for now. I was expecting. By the time you get a tip though.
My name is just formal name, it's really like, my name is just my formal name, it's supposed to like, to name my use.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, so.
I met someone called just a Laura the other day. I thought I seen you the other day. Let's get a Laura.
It's like, I go to that.
Okay. We met a lot of people. Okay. Oh, no, she's not. You want to stay. Well, she transitioned out of in there. Yes. She's not there. She's coming to get a spiritual.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I will. Don't ask me right now. If it's not good, I don't know. The nice one. Are you happy with that? You happy with that?
We took it out as a slide, so you could choose to talk about it.
Yeah. So much happier that I was on the screen. I love it. I have an email on conversation. That's 20 minutes. So I understand that for a while I had to burn it email box in the entire law school. And then when I got it down to 25,
Most titles are institutional. Titles are institutional.
And then it was like, why do you ask you to come see us when you go to the City Library? It's going back. Wow. It was hilarious. There's just nothing to get about. Right. We're sitting on the same track. What do you Oh, yeah, right now, not. Like, desk. Oh, thank you, so, I'll just we're gonna have to, I might just look at you guys, but I like talking to the audience. No, we want it down, because I'm probably gonna be behind you guys, and if it's up, the desk is walks yeah, we're just gonna post them.
This is, I mean, they're online already.
We'll start at 01, I usually do.
It's right outside of where all the doors are right there now. No, you're doing the support one.
Think about Kelly, which would last one, take this one out. Alright, once you're done with this will buzz
Oh, there it is, I got it.
Say yes. Request. Not It's pretty good. It's
My mom's birthday is like the
Okay, what
And my dad is
Can you hear me?
talking about
Excellent. Hi, my name is Debbie Ginsburg. I'm the Educational Technology Librarian at Chicago Kent. We are so excited that you are here at our law school today, and we hope that you guys are enjoying everything here. With me is Moki. What's your title?
I'm an application administrator, and I administer Google Apps for Chicago Kent.
Awesome IT guy. Sejal, our head of IT, was also going to talk with us, but weather got her in at what, 4 in the morning or something? 2 in the morning, something this morning. Then also,
My name is Emily. I'm the Technology Development and Training Librarian at Chicago Kent.
we wanted to talk to you about what we've been doing the last year with Google Apps for Education. We only became a Google Apps for Education campus as of Memorial Day of last year. We're going to talk to you a little bit about how we made that decision, how we did the transition, how we introduced Google Apps to what had formerly been very much an Exchange shop, and how we're integrating different aspects of Google Apps into our daily workflow, and where we expect to go in the future. Another important part of what we're going to be talking about is this isn't just a one department, or one person, or even a small group project. This is a project that involved lots of different people in the law school and all of them working together to get things done. So we're going to talk about how not only we have this new collaborative tool, but what it means for collaboration at Chicago Kent. So this was very much a student-driven decision. This is something that the students had been asking for. There are a couple of different things that they wanted. They wanted email for life. They didn't want to keep having to say, all right, we're not Chicago Kent anymore, now we don't have Chicago email. For them, it was very important that they had this resource. Also, students were already familiar with Gmail. They used it in their personal accounts, and what was available to them before this was just a basic webmail screen from Exchange 2003. We were not just an Exchange shop, but we were an Exchange 2003 shop. And if you've used webmail for Exchange 2003, particularly those of you who are Mac users, like I was, you knew that it was not the world's most friendly interface. So students were asking for a more modern email system. Also with a larger inbox. Under Exchange, I believe we were limited to, what, 100 megs worth of email? And those of us who had, 9 gigs worth of email could feel the students' pain when they were so limited. Students just stopped using webmail because it would fill up so quickly. So they wanted a better option. Meanwhile, at our main campus, they had already been transitioning to Google Apps for Education, and this gave us an opportunity. All right, they've already established some of the pathways, some of the different projects, management plans. They already had a lot of the work done, so we could then work with them to do our transition to Google Apps for Education. Obviously, since we were a 2003 server, and it was 2010, 11, 12 when we were getting this done, we desperately needed an equipment upgrade to have a more modern system, and this was going to be one that had less cost for us than buying and configuring a whole new Exchange server, and also offered many more the tools beyond the email as well. We'll talk about some of those. So this is what students wanted. They wanted Google Apps for Education. As I said, it offered other tools, obviously Gmail and Calendar, but it also offered tools for collaboration, such as Google Drives and Google Docs. And while we didn't have initially, we also have Google Sites. So this is what they had asked for. The process of getting this done did take a lot of planning. I believe they said, I was talking with Sejal earlier, I actually started the process in 2010 just to get it started, did a lot of meetings with main campus. And also in this process planning, while they were doing a lot of the work internally, lots of weekly meetings with their staff, they also made sure that they were engaging all of the different stakeholders that were going to be involved. The SBA was kept apprised of what was going on and when things would transition. They were very interested in this transition. The Faculty Technology Committee was given step-by-step information about what would be changing and when. And of course, senior management was involved in all steps of the process because they were going to have to be involved in introducing some of the new tools to the staff. Ahead of time, Google accounts were created for the transition. This took quite a bit of time because there was a definite deadline, and that deadline was Memorial Weekend 2012. Why? Because we needed a 3-day transition window in which we could move everything over, the email boxes over smoothly and easily, and during a time when there wouldn't be a lot of use. And Memorial Day is one of those few optimal times that we have during the academic year. We're not quite in summer school, we're definitely out of the spring semester, so now we'll have a chance to work with minimal disruption to what's going on in the rest of the school.
So all of this work had been going on behind the scenes. When we were getting close to the deadline, not 2 years in advance, but a week or two in advance, that's when it really became deadline time, and the process was getting very, very stressful for our IT department, and they really started reaching out to everybody else. So our public affairs department was involved in getting a lot of information up on the website, and Debbie and I had already been working with staff and with faculty doing a lot of training. That's part of my job description, it's part of hers. And so with all of the heavy pressure of the servers failing and things needing to happen and all of these accounts transitioning, that's when they made sure that we were a part of the initial pilot that existed. IT, obviously, their staff were using Gmail ahead of time, but we were also given access to it. We've been using Gmail personally well in advance because they kept us apprised of when these timelines were going to take place. I had done training sessions for staff, for instance, in the fall before the transition in the spring, just to give them a chance to take a look at Gmail and take a look at a lot of different Google apps and see how they could use it personally for staff if they were interested, to kind of give people a sense of, hey, new changes are coming and they're going to be great. We really wanted to manage expectations because that's the biggest challenge with changing technology, but not only changing technology that affects everybody's everyday work. Email is a huge portion of your day, and if you take away something, even if it's clunky, you know, the students hated the difficulty of their limited inboxes. They hated the difficulty of getting into webmail if they didn't have Internet Explorer, if they wanted to be a Mac user. But so that wasn't a big challenge. Transitioning staff who were using Outlook is a very different challenge. Outlook is a very complicated tool, and people were using it for a lot of different workflows and so forth. So managing expectations was our big challenge. We did this, and we had about a week to do a lot of this preparation. So one of the things we wanted to do was take some of this work off of ourselves. Google has a lot of great materials already available, so the help desk was sending out a handout that was available from Google explaining the difference between Outlook and Gmail. And we also had in-person training sessions for faculty and staff to attend. And that was the time because we were bundling this change with a lot of changes related to the main campus, doing kind of single sign-on. So a lot of people had account changes and password changes and things like that. They're also stressful changes. Nobody was super happy about all of this at the time, but we really wanted to make sure that as much as possible it was all streamlined. So we had training sessions in person. One thing I would say, if you are facing a change like this, by the end of the week, we kind of worked out a lot of the kinks, and what we found is it really helps to move from the general to the particular, so you don't have people waiting around, because when there's that much stress about changes, you don't want any impatience added to the mix if possible.
Right, so
a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Just learning how to communicate it as clearly as possible to as many people as possible.
Right, so do your general training first, the things that affect the most number of people, and then address specific issues outside the training.
So this is an example that we used in our preview. It's a video that's available on Google, anybody can, or on YouTube, anybody can look it up, called Transitioning to Gmail. And they have a lot of video resources that were very helpful. We showed them a few in-person things using our pilot accounts, but if you didn't have access to a pilot account, people could go back and view this again. And so again, all of these materials that we were presenting, we tried to kind of centralize them, make sure they're going out via email, then they're going out on the web, they're going out in person as well. So the actual weekend.
So the migration process was intense, as my boss would like me to put it. So our initial plan was to group users into power users and everybody else, but as you know, with any major IT project, nothing goes according to plan. So we had to re-strategize during the day of the migration. And then we decided, because it was summer and Memorial Day weekend, to migrate the summer students first along with the power users. In terms of timeline, as Emily said, we chose the Memorial Day weekend because it allows you to provide for any unforeseen circumstances that come up, which came up like we had many server issues where one of our Exchange servers bombed out, and we had to start the migration for power users all over again. And in terms, we do have a picture of a whiteboard during that migration period, which looks chaotic. So this kind of sums up how our migration process was.
Sorry, I'm going too far. So after the weekend, after all of the crazy work and the heroic task that they'd taken on of transitioning all of those accounts over one weekend and making sure that as soon as everybody came into work, their accounts were there. It worked. I mean, they lost probably 5 pounds a day or something, but it worked. So a lot of work had gone into that introduction period beforehand. So everything that's listed here did not happen that first day. It was done weeks in advance. But we found that no matter how often you send things out to people, they're not going to sit down and read your guide or your handout or any of those pieces of information in advance. A few people might print it out and put it somewhere. But for the most part, we didn't get that much engagement with it until finally they're looking at it. So the introduction was very important that we had that all prepared, but you can't expect that people are going to look at it on your timeline. They're going to look at it on theirs. So email announcements went out. This included who to contact for specific issues like mobile, which we still send everybody to Rudy. Or the help desk, but usually Rudy picks it up. There was an FAQ page which Sean helped make sure was up on the CLC page, and we had been working on online guides, which we used in the email. We also used it in our previous session, and we used it again in our training and as we got further questions. So making sure that people had central places to go for all this information was really key. This is an example of the FAQ page, which is still available on the Hangouts website if you'd like to take a look at that and use it as an example. And here is our Welcome to Google Apps Guide, which, as you can see, it also has that YouTube video that we had shown in our preview embedded on the first page. So when people came in that first day, they were going to that guide, or if they were coming to our training sessions, they saw, oh, this is the same information I've already seen. So, like I mentioned, we did have a lot of hands-on training and labs, and this wasn't just in the preview, this was also for the whole week afterwards. We had multiple sessions per day. We divided it up according to each app so that it would match what people's workflows were. If they were somebody who had a million emails and they were all carefully organized into different folders, and now what the heck happened to my folders? I am freaking out. I don't know where my contacts are. I use email every day constantly. Please help me. They had somewhere to go, and they knew it would be focused on their issue. If it was somebody who was dealing with calendar issues, we really just focused on the things that transition from Outlook to Gmail in these initial trainings. We tried to make sure they were as hands-on as possible. Everybody could be logged into their account, fixing things as we were showing them what to do. And we had a lot of Q&A time. And at the same time as this was going on, our whole library technology group team was there, and a few other people would make sure that they stopped by as well. And one person who's not here at the moment, Kim, went through and she wrote down all the questions so that as we were getting these really specific things that were showing up again and again, we could add those to our guide. So we have kind of an FAQ page on our guide that was where we added a lot of very customized, specific information for people who were having kind of just set up questions a lot of times. So the things that are on here are, how do I set up a signature? That's not a daily task, but it's something that will be stressful if you expect it to be there or it's not showing up the way that you expect, because you see it every day, you just don't set it up every day. And other tasks that people expected out of their email. Going back to Mohi, there were a lot of questions that went beyond our skill, and some of them were more specialized.
Right, so when it came to resolving tech questions, our help desk was the first line of support. And for any obscure questions like how to do mail merge in Gmail or how to write an HTML email in Gmail, those requests were routed to me through our ticketing system. And many faculty and staff also approached Emily and Debbie, and they made use of Google Forums to answer some of their questions. And when it comes to the ease of to administrative tasks on the Google side, there are a couple of options that Google provides us. So when it comes to control over releasing any upgrades that Google rolls out on a regular basis, we have a couple of options, which is rapid release and scheduled release. So rapid release puts the user's account at par with a regular Google account, which means that their account gets all the upgrades the day regular Google accounts get their upgrades. But here in Kent, we are on scheduled upgrade, which gives us like a week or two for us to come up with support questions and training. And Emily and Debbie have helped us a lot in that area. Also, when it comes to controlling the release of new services that Google comes out with every now and then, you have a couple of options, which is automatic and manual. Automatic, as the name suggests, is the users will see all the non-core services when the services come out. But here in Kent, we are on manual release, which again gives me control of what I want the users to see. And in terms of provisioning, that is creating new accounts and groups, especially in an educational setting, we need to create mailing lists at the beginning of every semester. We make use of Google App Manager, which is a command line tool, and I would say it's fairly easy to use. And also, one of my daily tasks is account delegation, because users need access to shared mailboxes, departmental accounts, and which can be easily done in the GAM tool as well.
Which we take use of all the time, so we're really happy to have Mohi to go to with these kinds of questions. So he has his level of daily tasks, which we don't have to even think about. We just know we can go to Mohi and get solutions. But when we were introducing this beyond those training sessions, the larger scale training that we were doing is really helping people understand the framework of what Google Apps can do and how it's different. Transitioning to new workflows was probably the highest stress point when people realized that they couldn't do things the same way they used to before. But helping people to understand that they could take control of their settings and customize things quite a bit themselves, we did find that people were pretty happy about that. I mean, even little changes like being able to change the color of your inbox, people, if you tell them they can do fun things in the settings, then they'll start poking around. And so during our training sessions, we saw a lot of that. You would go past the back of the lab and all of a sudden, things did not look all the same everywhere. And people were customizing it according to what they wanted. Adjusting to new tools, things that were added, people were pretty happy about the labs. There were a few things that they get frustrated with, and then they were actually doing a lot of kind of peer-to-peer training. Oh, did you check out this lab? You should add that, it'll move your signature to the top, which I think that one they finally just included in the core code because that didn't make any sense. The signature was beneath all your replies, but that was the kind of issue we were coming up with. But for instance, our career services department was thrilled with the canned messages lab because they send out a lot of very similar messages over and over. So being able to draft those and save those in their canned messages and just pull that up and then make a few edits and send it off was awesome. And the more that you saw things like that, the more that it changed from, I have to do this a different way and now I have to remember all the steps. There were always going to be a few things that were frustrating. That's just part of the process, but the more that they found tools that really worked for them and did what they wanted them to do, the happier they were and the more that we saw people train each other. Now there were some things that people just were never going to be happy with. Conversation view is probably one of the biggest kind of framework changes between Outlook, its normal email interface, and the way that Gmail does things, because Gmail groups everything by subject. So if people are sending things with the same subject line, all of a sudden they're in the same conversation. if they had the same subject line because they didn't use very specific subjects, that could get very confusing. If they were, how do I put this tactfully? If they were in an email exchange and they started saying things about other people and were forwarding and didn't realize they were including their names, there were issues with, I won't say privacy, but understanding the conversation flow, shall we say. So conversation view was really frustrating to a lot of our users. So again, there are some things you're never going to convert people to, but showing them that they can turn it off made them a lot happier. So that was more of our task at that level.
There are a couple of other things that people would ask us from time to time that we couldn't provide great answers to. For example, one, a lot of people in their workflows in Outlook would clear their sent folder, but Gmail uses labels. So we spent a lot of time explaining this transition from folders to labels. Some didn't get that you can't remove the sent label because that's the state of the message. But they found workarounds to work for them. Another thing that didn't quite work the way we hoped was Google Groups. Google Groups is good for setting up class lists, but Google Groups is also used to as a kind of listserv plus. But when we set up the Google Apps for Education, it didn't allow us to work with groups very well outside of our domain. This included, let's say, the Law School EdTech blog has a group. Emily and I are members of that, we could send and receive messages, but we couldn't access files. Our main campus also uses Google Groups, because I said they are also, IIT also uses Google Apps for Education, but we couldn't easily access their groups as well, so we had to figure out some workarounds around that. Meanwhile, while we were dealing with sort of the day-to-day issues, we wanted to explore some of the things that Google could do, Google Apps could do, beyond just email, calendar, and contacts. And this was actually one of the reasons why users like Emily and I were so excited when we suddenly were a Google shop. Now, we have been personal Google users for a long time, and we have been...
This required tact. Frustrated users don't want to hear excitement.
That's true. We had to temper our excitement at first, but we built it up over time. But we were excited because we had been using the collaborative features within Google in our personal accounts for a long time. We've been sharing spreadsheets and trading documents, building sites, all these different things, and now we can do this in our own work environment. So we started to see different ways that we could spread it out a bit. So I worked with research librarians, and we did project management using Google spreadsheets. We used to use MediaWiki for the library technology group. That's the group that Emily and I are part of. We used MediaWiki to do all of our project documentation and keep track of inventory, and we decided, okay, let's see if we could use Google Sites to do the same thing. And we found that that worked very well. In fact, we found lots of different uses for Google Sites. And the great thing we're finding out about Google is it's very integrative. So within Google Sites, we can embed a Google spreadsheet. So this is a spreadsheet of some completed tasks that we've done. So if we create a resource in one part of Google, we can integrate it into another part of Google. So as we started to build this up, we started to see some of the possibilities of how Google Apps could be used in a number of different places in the law school. So we do a lot of training for faculty and staff. We did actually very early training for staff back in 2011 to sort of get them used to the idea of, hey, Google might be coming here, here's some of the ways you could use it in your personal account, and this is what it can do for you. After the introduction, I do a lot of round bags with faculty as part of my job as an educational technology librarian, and after the transition I did quite a few for them to show them some of the different ways that Google Apps could work for them.
We also try to lead by example. Obviously, we have a lot of internal use. That was one of the first things that happened when he gave us our pilot accounts. We immediately went to our personal accounts and shared all of our documents we've been creating for work with our work accounts, so we wouldn't have to be switching back and forth between personal and work all the time. Unfortunately, we weren't able to transition ownership because Google's a little weird about apps for education and personal accounts, but that's okay. I can see them all on my work account now, which is very nice. But we didn't want it to just be those of us who are techie and are really into it are doing this. That's great. It gives us a lot of ideas and we can take that to people, but we really wanted to make sure it was something that was so simple that everybody else could see it and that it would build, again, just like with the settings, a lot of peer-to-peer training of, I figured out how to do this, it's awesome, I want to use it all the time. Some of these tasks, for example, this is a very simple one that has really taken off and I'm planning to do some training on it very soon. when I don't have to plan Cali presentations anymore. But this is an email that's sent out from our staff committee, and it's a shared account, and we send it out pretty regularly for staff events, and it has a Google form embedded in it. You can't really tell because it doesn't look anything like Google Forms, but it says right here, will you attend? It has 2 radio buttons, and then it has a submit thing that tells people that they're here, so they'll be there. When I start telling people, oh, did you know that's using Google Forms, and I can show you how to do that, then we start seeing the dean's office pick it up, and we start seeing it being used for faculty and other groups as well. It's not always, that simple 5-second 1-2, but people can see the payoff. And we can start to share those RSVP lists with the people who are setting up the event, for instance, and they get different levels of permissions. And that's really one of the best things about the collaborative tools is there's also very careful permissions set up in Google Apps. So with that site, for instance, with the Google Doc embedded in it, if there's something that we need to have the site for our group, but I only want one person to be able to edit a page, I can control that. If I need to put content on that page that I need to share outside our group, I can do that with the Google Doc. I know who has access, I know what control they have, and I know what they can see. Sometimes it's a little bit of review and training to make sure people get used to where they can find these things, but once they get used to using them, there's a lot of enthusiasm. People are leery at first when you say, oh, I'm going to show you how to use a Google Doc. Okay, I know how to use Word. Can you just show me Word? Well, here's what else it can do for you. It's always there. You can always find it. They click on it, they edit it. Oh, I can see what they're, oh. And you get that kind of a response from it more and more.
And this is, to go back a second, this is actually happening. So we've got faculty here saying, oh, I can see some of the possibilities of Google Calendar, and they set up a calendar to share events with each other. There was someone who wanted to share a document with Sangel and me, and she said, I'm not sure if I can get this Google Docs to work, but she did it. She said, wow, that was easy. So they think it's going to be hard until they actually approach it, and they find out it's a lot easier than they thought it was, and then they start to get excited about the next possibility. So that's sort of where we are now. Now, the other thing that's happened over the last few months since we've started using Google Apps for Education is we are realizing that Google Apps for Education doesn't include everything that you will have in your personal account. It doesn't include, well, we've already mentioned, it doesn't include the full Google Groups. Picasa, Hangouts, Reader, other kinds of services like that. And users have been saying, not just Emily and me, but faculty and staff and students, hey, we'd like it to do a little bit more, particularly with Google Groups, and there's a lot of interest in Hangouts. So we started to consider, well, should we enable the non-core services? And there are a few considerations that we have to think about before we enable the non-core services. Now, one of the big issues with enabling the non-core services is we are a Google Apps for Education site. And that means Google will support us in the Google Apps for Education. So if something's breaking, something's not working, we can go to Google and they will help us fix it. They do not provide the same support for non-core apps. So this is one of the issues that we can run into for enabling the non-core apps. There are a couple other issues too. There was some concern, would our privacy agreement change if we enable the non-core apps? In our research, we found it would not. However, for some of the non-core apps, the terms of service do change. And because of this, in order to enable the non-core apps, when they're turned on, the day they're turned on and the users log into Google, then they will need to click on something that has information about some of the new terms of service. And we wondered if maybe some of our users might get upset about that. So we spent a lot of time working on an email. We had a lot of help from senior management on this to make sure that we gave the best information and training information possible before we enabled the non-core apps. Other issues is some of the non-core apps have financial or cost implications, and we don't have any policies for financial transactions for individuals, so we have to be careful. So analytics can have a cost implication, so that's not yet enabled. But we did enable the apps finally because of the very thorough and informative email. There was very little pushback. Not many people were very concerned when they had to click the new terms of service, and they were very happy with some of the new services that were available. Now, one of the things people were pretty happy about was Hangouts, which lets you do sort of video chat. Unfortunately, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, Google has a tendency to change things, and you guys may remember that they just changed Hangouts at the end of May, very shortly after we launched Apps for EDU.
Days after.
Days after. So we showed our faculty and they said, this is great, we can't wait to start using it. I did all this training, individual training, and then they changed it. The way they changed it is they killed the original Hangouts app. And our main campus has not yet enabled the new Hangouts app within Google Apps because they're still under review. So until our main campus is ready to have it go, it's not something that's available, at least not fully. We can do video chat, but not formal Hangouts. So we're waiting on that. The other thing that we've been a lot of excitement over was Google Reader. Lots of people come up, oh, I really want to use Google Reader in my professional account. I don't. I want to be able to separate it from my personal. And we all know what happened to Google Reader.
Google kills things.
So bad about this.
Okay, so with these new apps coming out, we also had to do, again, some level of training and communication. And we really kind of changed our strategy. That early guide that I showed you that had a lot of very specific FAQs, a lot of those were written by us with very careful, I'm going in, I'm grabbing a screenshot, and I'm showing you exactly what is on each page, because that's the level of help that people needed when they were completely unfamiliar with the interface. These were new tools that were, it wasn't a matter of transitioning from one idea of how email works to a new idea, it's just a new tool. Keeping up with screenshots, as you know, with any web interface is kind of a huge challenge. So we decided to streamline our training process as well at this point. So a lot of the information on this new guide, which is guides.canada.iit.edu/CK Google Apps, we had grabbed directly from the Google interfaces. We just kind of spent a lot of time reading over their forums, reading over their help documents, reading over their blogs, and finding the best descriptions and the best links to send people to. So that will be a lot less maintenance for us to do on our training as people are coming in and trying out the new tools, because we don't know, there's not an exact timeline for when people are going to start to play with, let's say, Google Books, for example. And we still need to build this content out as we do more training, but for the most part, we're finding it's a lot faster and more reliable to point to the materials that Google was creating that they can support, rather than putting all of those details on ourselves. On the other hand, when we are communicating on an issue that we know could be sensitive, this is an example, as Debbie mentioned, we did a lot of prep for the Hangouts, because in order to get Hangouts, you have to get Google+. In order to play with Google+, you have to create a social networking profile. That is not something that everybody is comfortable with. That is not something that everybody needs to be comfortable with. And we didn't want to push people into doing something that would have privacy implications. It's not a matter of policy. It's a matter of controlling your own private information. And so we went through and did a lot of screenshots at this level, because that was something that we knew we would have a group of people coming through at the same time. It was worth doing this step by step. Of course, all these screenshots are probably out of date as well, because Google Plus also changed their whole interface. But for the moment when people are doing it, this is what they needed to see. So I took screenshots, as I said, on my own account, and then I put very specific, you can do this, you don't have to, you don't have to, you don't have to, at each point of the setup screen. So for the people that would be nervous about it or uncomfortable with the information that they're asking for when they're viewing the forum, we made sure that they had this in the email that they had it in the training sessions, and they could print it out if they wanted to. We also created different formats of the same information. So handling upgrades, it's always going to be a challenge for support, it's going to be a challenge for training, but it's going to be a challenge for individual users. And we had to deal with this on a smaller level with the changes to Gmail. Last fall, after everybody got transitioned in the spring, then we came out with the new Google Compose, and it actually addressed some of the issues that people were coming up with why doesn't it work the same way as Outlook? I want to be able to minimize an email and still go through my inbox, which with the old Compose wasn't a possibility. So it wasn't something that we had universal pushback, but we had already seen from our training that we needed to give people very clear expectations for what was going to happen, how much control they would have, what their choices and options were. So Sajal and senior administration and the library and a lot of other groups went over this a few different ways to make sure we had very clear communication. And one of our staff members, Debbie, came up with a nice screencasting recording showing people what it would look like using her own account. And then one of our staff narrated it, and she's getting involved in some of those projects as well. So again, a team effort is really important in all this communication, because you're not going to find that only one person gets the question. So everybody needs to really know how to support it as well. And communication is a first step for support. obviously. Inbox is coming up with new changes soon. I don't know how many of you have seen that. They want to add new ways of filtering your inbox. Supposedly to help with, what did somebody call it? It's not spam, it's bacon. This is like spam that you sign up for because you want to find out if there's an ad, but you don't want to find it out every day. So it's a little bit better, but it still kind of sucks if it's in your inbox, it's related. We're not sure how much that'll help people, but we have to pay attention to these things. There are some changes that won't affect every user. I got access to the preview version of the new Google Maps, and I think it's beautiful. I think it works really well. I've read a lot of articles where people are kind of concerned about some of the, I don't know, larger framing issues of who Google is sending people to, but I think it's going to be very usable and very user-friendly. The only problem is I use maps for more advanced steps, and I don't see them in the preview for the new map, so I'm a little nervous about that. Those of you that have a handout that says restaurants around Chicago, there's also a Google Maps version of that we keep updated every semester so that new students during orientation, during conferences, things like that, people can go onto Google Maps and find one that's customized with information about the restaurants around here. If I don't have that option anymore, I'm not going to be happy about it, but I can't really tell because it's just a preview version. So handling upgrades, new and improved, can be awesome. It can solve a problem that everybody's had, or it can mean I'm getting rid of a service you always loved.
Like Reader.
So, what do we take out of this overall? Looking forward, looking back, what do we see as general principles? As I said over and over, managing expectations is absolutely key when you're transitioning a daily task tool. But clear communication is on you. Managing expectations, you can do as much as possible to make sure that people are comfortable, and you can do that mostly through your communication, but you're not going to make everybody happy. You can't do that. So we found that multiple formats of the communication do the most good. Use email, but people will lose their email. They'll forget to print it off. They won't have access to it at the moment. They'll forget their password because we just had a huge password switch at the same time as the email switch, things like that. Videos are very helpful for people who want to be shown and don't want to have to do anything. Guides are helpful for people who want who want to click around and explore on their own. Slides, again, that gives you a little bit more control, and in person, always, because in person gives people a name and a face that they can come back to, that they know that there is support there, that they know that there's somebody they can trust. So having all of us available and showing up, even if we weren't the ones presenting at the training, other people would stop by to make sure that they know, oh, you can also go to this person, we can point to them, just kind of like we've been doing during this presentation. Oh, that's the person you go to with that question. And making a very clear show of how important teamwork is also makes everybody else feel like they're supported.
So there's also important lessons that we learned here, not just how Gmail works, but how we will work together. We have been, I'm sure people in this room, to countless presentations about how IT and libraries can work better together. Those discussions just can't happen anymore. We have to work together. We don't have a choice. And not only do we have to work together, we have to work together with everyone else. Who here is getting more staff? Right.
No one?
No one, okay. So we are no longer in a situation where we can rely on the staffs in our individual departments to get things done. As we pointed out here, CLC has been working really hard, IT staff have been working really hard to do all the technical things that needed to be done to get the Gmail transition to happen, but they needed some help with training, and training is something that we do in the library. So we would, of course, naturally work together on this. They needed information put onto the website, and naturally they're going to turn to PA to help for this. So they start reaching out. They do the stuff they're expertise on, and they start looking for expertise elsewhere in the law school to get the job done. This is what has to happen now. And we've seen since this that not only are we working together in the law school, but we're seeing different ways that our groups can work with others. So IT now works very closely with our main campus. Now, of course, like other law schools, we want to maintain our identity, but we want to use shared resources where it makes sense. And now we're able to have those dialogues. Okay, what are the shared resources that make sense to use? How can we use these together? How can we transition together so that it works best for the students, staff, and faculty on the main campus, and the students, staff, and faculty on the law school? So we're seeing that as well. In the library too, we're looking for different ways that we can work with other departments. So for example, Emily does a lot of training with staff to help them work with Google the best way possible. I think you mentioned career services and other groups as well. Plus we're looking for opportunities to do other works. Emily now, for example, handles WordPress for the law school. This had once been an IT job, but now there's parts of IT involved, public affairs, Emily and the library. It involves the groups that are using it, faculty who are using blogs, faculty support who are using blogs, very important to this process. Faculty support has done a lot of the groundwork, by the way. They're the ones who make sure faculty get things working when they are about ready to tear their hair out. Faculty support is right there, making sure things are working for them. So again, it's everyone working together, and we no longer can be in these silos. And collaboration gives us more opportunities to do things like the WordPress sites. And we're finding ways to use Google to do this. So for example, library and IT have been doing research onto new educational technologies, and we created Google Sites to manage the documents and the education for that, or the information for that research. Or we just recently hired a social media specialist in public affairs. And Emily worked with other people to get a bunch of information about how social media was used on this campus, so that information would be available when that person came aboard. She used Google Sites to do that as well. So this has shown us that not only, are we getting a helpful tool, but we're using this tool to work together.
And it's the way that Google is designed to work. It is a collaborative tool. Every piece of it is integrated. The tech integrates, the tech collaborates, and it saves you time because you don't have to think about, I have to figure out how to get this permission through IT in this group so that it'll be an active directory so that group will exist so that I can do that. No, you can manage the group as appropriate. The staff directory or the staff news group, for instance, I can choose who has access to that account because I manage it. So there's a little bit of trust that's required for these types of projects, but the payoff is definitely worth it. These tools are meant to work together. They're meant to break down those silos. When you're creating a Google site, when you're creating a Google Doc, you can see who has access to it. So it isn't a matter of, they're not on the department list, so they can't see it anymore. It's the department list plus this person or minus that person or wherever it needs to be. So the projects match the skills rather than the projects matching some kind of artificially created or, not artificially created department list or something like that, but you can really control it on a very granular level. And just the ease of use, the fact that this doesn't require huge amounts of training, it just requires a little setup and then people can take it and go, really makes it a lot faster for new projects to take off because people have tools that they can use at their disposal.
Sejal, do you have any last minute remarks you wanted to add to this?
Sejal's really tired.
Yes, Sejal's very tired. I understand. Yes?
Can you share anything about the cost? Your next steps? Are you going to push for Google computers?
I don't think Google computers are necessary. Actually, if anything, we've gone to being, like Debbie and I were able to move to Mac because we didn't have to deal with needing to have Internet Explorer in order to, access things anymore.
And we didn't need Outlook anymore either.
Yeah, Outlook. So,
If Dawn has a response.
Yeah, what we're saving on average, having exchange, we were paying between staff and equipment that about $70,000 a year to support that.
let me just repeat that so that people hear it on recording. Dawn Rumsich is our head of administration and finance, and she mentioned that with exchange it costs about $70,000 a year.
Yeah, and now with Google Apps, it's less than $5,000.
There's staffing expenses always, but you're going to have the staff anyway. So why not work with something that doesn't have that overhead?
Wow, less than $5,000. That's impressive.
Have you looked at Google Chromebooks or Chromeboxes?
Not at this point. I mean, we have a whole infrastructure of technology in the school already, so that might be something we look to in the future, but I don't see that we are losing any capabilities of Google Apps by not using a Chrome computer.
Back there?
Hi, yes. You mentioned that you were using the tools yourself in your office, and then you saw the dean's office seeing what you did. How long did it take for that aha moment to take place where you saw?
Let's see. Well, that aha moment took place last week, but
Actually, I couldn't see what the dean's office was.
Almost a year, yeah. So it took like almost a year
depends on when we started telling people that we were using it sometimes, because there were some projects where we've been using it over and over ourselves for a long time, and then we felt like, okay, now we see your need and we're ready to do it. I wouldn't say that we started pushing the new apps right away. Part of it was just, again, having seen that there was a lot of frustration on some level. You didn't want to take somebody who's sitting there going, I can't get this to work, why doesn't this look the same? At that moment, and say, oh, awesome new things. Like I said, we had to temper our enthusiasm for the first month or so just to make people comfortable. But once we started to see that kind of peer-to-peer thing of this, I know how to do this, let me show you something else, then we started introducing more training.
The faculty calendar, for example, happened many months back.
Yeah.
So the faculty attended your training and
yes.
your colleagues, the staff. What about students?
Students tend to be familiar with it anyway, though we're starting to come up with some new ways to reach out for students, because you can only assume a certain amount of familiarity. Now, students did ask for this because of their familiarity.
Yeah.
Rachel, you're going to add?
Yeah, our students, they were familiar with the product, so we didn't really do any training for the students. It was more for faculty and staff. We did, when we were introducing the product, we held like a demo during the faculty tech meeting and got them versed in the product. So we just showed them what things were going to look like and just got them pre-engaged. And then as we moved forward, we held sessions and training, which really helped. And we had a lot of support in place. So it was one-to-one support, or Debbie and me, the help desk. Every IT person was involved in support.
And the other thing for students, most of our students are very comfortable with Gmail. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've learned how all of these things integrate or that there are these tools available. So that's something that looking forward, even just as I'm putting together these slides, that started to stand out to me a lot more. And say that I haven't had a chance to talk to you because you've been traveling, but I had a chat with the person who's in charge of our student services department, especially student organizations, and she's thinking it may be helpful for me to do some training for the student org leaders during their orientation to say, oh, here's, for instance, that Google form email that I showed. She said there were always issues with how people could vote for leadership in the student organizations, and I said, well, I can show them a process that they can pick up on. So as we start to see that there are processes that maybe students aren't going to figure out on their own, then we have to figure out who's the best group to target, because students don't have the same kind of availability. They're very stressed, they're very, task-oriented according to the classes that they're taking, and it's harder to give them generalized skills training because they aren't necessarily going to see the need for that or value it at that moment. So it's more,
they already think they know it.
right, especially if they think they're an expert already.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, real quick. Do you have students from outside the institution that come in with a different email address that you have to convert?
Yes, they do come in, and Google Groups has a function where you can add external email addresses.
Okay, and do they pick up your email ask? Or
No, they can come in, like we have students coming in from Loyola they visit for a semester or two, and we can add their official email address as against creating new email addresses for them in the same class list. And the instructor can send an email to the class list and they'll get it.
Oh, that's nice.
And this is new as of opening up the Google Apps without education. I think we've had some fun with that.
We collaborate with, I have a student worker in the audience right now who's from the main campus or the Stewart program, and so we've been able to add students from main campus very easily, and she's checking her own email when I'm sending her stuff, so she doesn't have to manage multiple accounts. So that type of
I have one more question. Did you consult in this process with any other law schools? Or are you aware of some other law schools who moved to?
We had one staff member who actually came here from another school who had already made the transition, so he was part of that initial planning
What's
process.
the other law school?
It wasn't a law school.
Oh, no, sorry, it wasn't the law school, it was the main university.
Yeah, there are a couple of law schools that have transitioned to Google Apps, but if you get onto Technoids and pose a question, a lot of folks will respond.
So wait, who here is using Google in their law school? So we've got quite a few.
There's
Who
a
here is
good number.
considering using Google? So a few there are.
How many would like to but don't think they can?
So, I have a question. I stepped in a little late, so I wasn't sure if, regarding Gmail in general, have you guys seen that you've had faculty members or staff members who are still clinging to like old desktop clients for checking their email
So we don't support desktop clients
at all?
at all.
Okay.
We have transitioned lot of support on the integrated. So if you were used to using a function from the desktop client, we kind of make it work with it.
Right, and here,
That's our strategy.
So how did you guys handle like archive email that had that was like over top to like existing stuff?
If I can repeat the questions, just so that this gets on the recording. You were asking about desktop clients, and Sejal pointed out that we really, it was a part of the transition focused on everybody using the web client. We did not support any kind of desktop client or email. And the second question was some of the functionality of desktop clients, such as archiving.
Okay, so they're still keeping their archive on their full.
Yeah, so they have archives, and we just haven't got to a point where we transition, but we work with these users on a one-to-one basis, and then just use the client to transfer the mail.
right, for example, this actually happened to me. At one point, Sejal showed us some of the biggest inboxes in the school, and I think I was third. I took that opportunity to create some archives so I could go down to 25. It took a while because it was a big inbox. They wanted to focus on, smaller inboxes first to transfer most of my email over. It went over, and then later, several months later, I worked with Rudy to help transfer my archive boxes over, and that's the kind of transition. One other thing I want to point out is one of the things that made it, I think, much easier to transition from desktop to a web client is, again, the expertise and help of our faculty support who are there on the ground, and they're very technologically capable and very good at leading the faculty in particular to the space they need to be to make the email work for them.
So the question was about archives left on people's individual computers because those are saved on the computer and not onto the network. And the answer was that we worked with IT on a one-to-one basis, getting those integrated and uploaded into your Gmail account because there are the same kind of limits there that there were with Outlook.
Sorry, I had one last question.
Sure.
Again with Gmail, did you guys have any resistance from faculty or staff with regard to privacy issues?
The question was, did anybody have any resistance to Gmail based on privacy concerns?
We have a law office clinic here, and they were extremely concerned about the privacy issues with that. And so I work very closely with our IT folks on the main campus and also with the general counsel's office to convince them that they really shouldn't be concerned. We're covered under our contract. In fact, we're probably better off and safer in a Gmail environment than we were with an Exchange.
And there are a lot of law firms and so forth out there that are using Gmail, so there are external resources that people can go to find more information about this.
On the same sort of front, have you guys had any experience with data freezes or message archiving? Does any of this stuff support that?
Oh, data freeze and message archiving.
Do you mean during the migration or?
No, for instance, we have occasionally there's legal action against the university or something like that. We're required to data freeze certain staff members' emails.
We haven't faced that yet. I know it's been a concern. The last I talked with general counsel, they have a policy with main campus, and so we just work with our main campus to adapt to whatever they're using for these types of situations. But we don't have a policy in place right now.
Other questions? Yes.
I've been at 2 schools where they use Gmail for students and Outlook for faculty and staff. And I'd just like to hear what you have to.
Oh, well, you're asking the people who are the big Gmail enthusiasts why we think that staff should have Gmail as well as students. And again, I would just say the collaborative aspects are huge, going from the stress of having to, for instance, how many people in this room have in their inbox, no matter what they're using, a lot of attachments to their emails where there's a conversation string that goes back and forth, and it's the same document, there's lots of different edits. Yeah? Okay, I'm seeing lots and lots of nodding. Well, we transitioned it to Gmail, now everything's in the same conversation. If it's an attachment, it's still a pain in the neck. You have to figure out where it's attached to that conversation, but once we start getting more people comfortable with Google Docs, it's the same link everywhere. You can see the previous versions if you need to, you can add comments, you can respond to comments, but it's the same thing. So things like that, honestly, especially within our own group, I can't imagine going back. I would probably cry, let's be honest.
Other questions? All right, thanks for coming today. Hope that But other faculty are within, once you get it, and it says like in there all the time, and I'm like, and so they're okay with that. But then once we got to log on our computers, we have to log on to the campus system. And we have to they didn't like that, so once you log on to it, they got the overall. One thing that happened to the better, so I don't think your concept of why I don't think this did something, is I think they're being able to ask the other committees. Plug in an email that runs, and this week, plug in an email. This suddenly meant that the Gmail app on my iPhone, this meant that I could log into things correctly. This meant that when I closed and opened the browser, I could get everything back. It used to be catalog.edu, that's catalog.ie. That's another change that was done that we wanted a little bit more branding with our vacation. Trying to work more closely, show recent work like kind of your eye, and if they're blocking or aware of what they were saying. So, well, let's take advantage of this, their technology. Let's take advantage and do more collaboration. So, we have talked about it. I'm not technology advisors for my son's grade school district. Chromebooks have come up there. I know, so it does. Right, so that's for middle school and students. Sixth grade, 7, 8, 9, 6, 7, 8, 9. That would be with the younger students graduating and has tablets, so that may be a solution for them. So we're trying to see how students living in this environment. I don't know. That's one right, it's expensive. Right, that's what like what they're cheaper. We have a lot of scary teachers out here. You can't scare the teachers out of it. You can walk that with your bad grade school teachers. I have another
He's working in the school. So I do that. Otherwise, they are not obligated to
Yeah, Dawn knows the numbers. Yeah, thanks so much for all your answers. Nice job. Thanks so much. That's awesome. Nice work. Your job is done.
I'm pretty sure that's why. Which one? As soon as we say
Hey, Sable, did you want any snacks? And just your coffee, right?
So you're able to start the collaboration.
Go ahead, Amy.
Hey, I just spoke with Dawn. She wanted me to mention to you that we have a blinking light in door 510 that she wanted to fix before tomorrow morning.
And 10-4, I know about that light. We just ordered ballot for that light. I will remove the bulb so it's not blinking though.
Okay, copy.
And then that just reads.
It's changing.
For you guys, I mean, it's actually, it's tough for, it's still tough.
Maybe definitely start up the group. Right. We have our group headaches as well.
No, I
But it works out, if we have these type of
I was the same way when I was here, and I wish I had rented a car so I could come to see.
So we figure out where we're gonna get clients from.
Yeah, we kind of started